A couple of weeks ago, I put up a poll on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I gave a couple of choices of things that you might want to hear me talk about on the podcast as far as Cape Cod history goes. I always make the joke that even though there are two choices and one has to be a winner, I'll end up covering both at some point. But the overwhelming winner was the Storyland Amusement Park in Hyannis. And it's a fascinating tale if you enjoy learning about what used to be on Cape Cod and New England in general, because obviously Route 132, Route 28, and Hyannis are so developed now, but that wasn't always the case. Cape Cod Mall has always been there through my lifetime, but my parents, my grandparents, they told me there was a time when it was different. In the middle of the 20th century, Route 132, which is now one of the busiest areas on all of Cape Cod, was actually a rural road with lots of trees and very few stores. And where the Cape Cod Mall now stands was a place called Storyland Amusement Park. The idea for this amusement park came from the mind of a man named George Spalt. He was a summer resident of Cape Cod. He used to live in Loudonville, New York. While working as a contractor in Albany, he saw several of these small children's amusement parks during vacations up to the Adirondack Mountains in the 1950s, specifically one called Storytown, USA, which opened in 1954. Spalt wanted to create such an amusement park on Cape Cod, and it's ironic now when you think about the area where the mall currently stands was just trees, basically. There were very few buildings there. So in March 1955, 34-year-old Spalt purchased a 9-acre lot of the land that would become the mall eventually, and he started to create his Storyland. The Storyland Park was based around the Mother Goose nursery rhymes. He built 30 structures that were scattered around the 9 acres, which made it like you had to walk through an enchanted forest to get to these. Imagine that. These places where they walked are now long corridors of stores in the mall. All in all, the design of Storyland only took 3 months, but it cost Spalt about $40,000, which equates to about $400,000 today. And the park opened in June of 1955 between a Sunoco gas station and the Top of the Morn Motel on Route 132. And from the get-go, it was a huge success. The nursery rhyme characters like the Big Bad Wolf, the Three Bears, Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe, the house that Jack built, they were all there to be seen by children. And many of them had large, colorful buildings and figures along with them. And these were the work of Matthew Cobb, who was a talented artist. His great-great-grandfather, Daniel Cobb, had run a general store in Barnstable around the turn of the 19th century. So this guy was deeply connected to Cape Cod. And much like Disneyland and Disney World, there were actors playing characters like Little Red Riding Hood. Other figures were mechanical, like the Big Bad Wolf, who was voiced by unseen actors, including Cape League baseball player Frank Burleson in 1955. And of course, there were candy booths, gift shops, and a barnyard, too, where you could feed the farm animals. There were ponies, even a duck pond. All of this was on the land where the Cape Cod Mall now stands. That's what makes it fascinating to me, because my whole life it's been the Cape Cod Mall, just a giant mashup of stores and parking lot as far as you can see. But 60 years ago, it was this fairy tale land amusement park. During its first few years, nothing really changed about the area around Route 132 and Route 28. It remained pretty rural, so much so that in 1957, when the Locusts returned, you could hear their hum as you drove along Route 132. But times change, and that area of Hyannis, it seems like it was always destined to become the hub of business on Cape Cod. And that started in 1961. Plans began for the All Cape Shopping Center, which would be located on 40 acres of land right at the airport rotary, centered around Picture Pond. The property would end up becoming Cape Cod's largest shopping center. And the land east of Storyland, which is now the Christmas Tree Shop Plaza, that land got bulldozed, and the first business to be erected on the property was Abercrombie & Fitch, which went up in April 1963. Ironically, that plaza never materialized. The plans were there, but it fell through, unfortunately. But what it did do was kind of put in motion the plans for eventual shopping centers, which set in motion the plans for the Cape Cod Mall. Storyland remained basically unchanged through the first half of the 1960s, although mini golf courses, restaurants, hotels, they began to spring up around the area. So it was kind of like the writing was on the wall. George Spalt, the creator, he didn't stop at Storyland. Based on its success, he developed Adventureland in Newburyport, Massachusetts, as well as Cowboy Town in Plainville, Massachusetts. Despite those additions to his empire, Storyland's reign was coming to an end. In July 1968, negotiations were completed that basically it sold the Storyland property for what would become the Cape Cod Mall. Even before the groundbreaking went in, they already had announced the anchor stores for the Cape Cod Mall, and it was Sears, Filene's, and Woolworth. During the 1968 season, George Spalt started looking for areas to move his Storyland Amusement Park. He didn't want to just lose it. And as luck would have it, he did. He found a replacement spot in Orleans, near the Orleans Rotary. January 1969, they took all of the structures down from Hyannis, moved it out to a filled-in cranberry bog near the Orleans Rotary. And it was ready, so Storyland reopened in Orleans for the 1969 season. That chapter of Storyland's existence was not as successful. By 1974, Storyland was closed in Orleans, and it sat vacant for several years. Eventually, everything was bulldozed, and it became the Stop and Shop Plaza that is there now. As for the Cape Cod Mall, the skeleton structure began to rise from the ground during the summer of 1969, with the first section of the mall actually opening to the public on August 4th, 1970. 28 stores would open that day, which brought to culmination of 4.5 years from the planning of the mall to the completion. And today, the Cape Cod Mall is over 800,000 square feet. They just added Target and Dick's Sporting Goods last year. And for those visiting, it seems like it's always been there. Like you couldn't imagine a time where it was all trees and there was this fairy tale amusement park there. But it was. There's a lot of photos. So if you go to theimaginaryworld.com, there's a whole section of photos of Storyland. I got a lot of photos from Flickr. You can find them there. And it seems like there's no way it could have been real that this actually existed. But Cape Cod was so much different 60, 70 years ago than it is now. I'll throw a link in the description of the podcast to the Imaginary World if you want to check out photos of Storyland. Otherwise, for you longtime Cape Codders or visitors, next time you pull into the mall, just close your eyes and imagine Mother Goose or the Big Bad Wolf, these buildings, the woman who lived in a shoe. That was reality 60 years ago when Storyland Amusement Park became the first business on the Cape Cod Mall property.